Hello and welcome. You're watching the newsroom breaking this hour with me, Kriti Mehta. Now let's start with the top focus story at this bulletin. The death toll from the devastating floods and landslides across Asia has climbed past 1,100, with Sri Lanka and Indonesia among the hardest hit. Both countries have deployed military teams as rescue operations expand across isolated communities. Torrential monsoon rain swept through Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Sumatra, southern Thailand and northern Malaysia last week, leaving villages cut off and survivors stranded on rooftops. In North Sumatra, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto said he believes the West is over, but pressure is growing for him to declare a national emergency. Indonesia has reported at least 593 deaths, while Sri Lanka says 355 people have been killed. Hundreds remain missing. Colombo saw flood waters peak overnight. And with the rain easing, authorities have said that water will begin to recede. Meanwhile, a survivor has returned to his house after surviving the flood in Indonesia, which has killed over 593 people. The rains have moved on and the flood waters have largely receded. But the disaster has left a trail of devastation and trauma. Let's listen in to what the survivor said.
Kejadian itu saya terseret arus, terus semua orang runtuh dari atas. Saya diginikan sama seng bekas orang yang datang dari atas itu. Sehingga kemudian masa runtuh, baru saya dihanyutkan ke bawah itu. Dan saya nyelam kan, akhirnya terseret arus. Sambil pernah boka hanyut ke bawah itu 150 meter lah kira-kira kan. Air masih deras. Udah di atas rata-rata itu.
Udah di atas atap, dekat atap.
Udah di atasnya. Ada pohon-pohon kelapa itu sambil saya pegang, terus ada kayu itu, saya rasakan kaki kan. Kemudian sampai juga sini puncak rumah saya juga kiranya. Tuh selama 3 jam sana itu berat sampai air susut, lama susut air.
Earlier, the cyclone Senyar, an exceptionally rare tropical storm, has caused catastrophic flooding and landslides, sweeping away homes and submerging thousands of buildings. I'm now joined in by my colleague Marisha Barre to get us more inputs. Marisha, what's the latest that you're picking up?
Diseases have also been reported as a cause of hindrance in the assistance and aid for these regions. Now, military in Indonesia and Sri Lanka have been deployed for relief. In fact, India has played a vital role in providing relief and support to Sri Lanka throughout this tragedy. Now, humanitarian groups include the IFRC have been actively involved in the rescue and aid, which have been assisting the affected communities and regions. So yes, Kriti, for you and your viewers, that is the recent update. We're still hoping that evacuation and rescue and aid is taken into consideration with a little bit more seriousness, considering the humanitarian crisis at stake.
All right, thank you, Marsha, with helping us with that input. And with that, let's shift our focus to the war in Ukraine and the peace deal that's under works. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and French President Emmanuel Macron are addressing the media. Zelensky has reiterated that Russia should receive no reward for its aggression in Ukraine. In a recent statement, Zelensky emphasized that Ukraine's primary focus remains on securing guarantees for its security and maintaining its sovereignty amid ongoing tension with Russia. Macron also commented on the situation, stating that the coming days will see further discussions between the US and Ukraine's allies regarding security guarantees. Macron stressed that the European nations and Ukraine's allies must be present at the negotiating table to ensure that the protection of Ukraine's territorial integrity is ensured. He also noticed that Ukraine and only Ukraine has the right to decide on its territorial matters. Joining us again is my colleague Marsha Barre. Marsha, crucial talks are to be held between Steve Witkoff and Putin tomorrow in Moscow. What are we learning?
Well, yes, Kriti. Like you very rightly mentioned that U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff and Putin are going to be in talks in this week. But let's just go back and talk about the whole meet and the union between Zelensky and Macron. Now, Ukraine and France have had unified ties in the past, and this meet once again reiterates their strong ties and commitment to help each other. Now, Zelensky has constantly asked for a union towards the EU. He has sought constant help and support by the EU with the war that has been waging in Russia. Now, Zelensky pushed for a just and lasting peace and has sought unified European backing in all of this. Now, this meeting between Zelensky and Macron is not come out of the blue, but it has followed talks in Florida between US and Ukraine with Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff, who is also, like you mentioned, set to meet Putin in Moscow this week. Now, concerns are rising with regards to this peace plan and how it is going to deal justly for both Russia and Ukraine. Now, discussions come as Ukraine faces the battlefield strain. Russia has stated multiple times that they will not be stepping back from a few controlled regions in Ukraine. Now, Zelensky's, the deciding factor in all of this is Zelensky will decide Ukraine's next step after receiving a full report from the delegation that returns from US after the talks. He is also something that must be mentioned is that he will be visiting Ireland tomorrow. He's traveling for further talks with regards to the peace. So these are the current developments. He is set to meet in Ireland with officials. And yes, Putin and Witkoff are to meet this week for talks with regards to the peace.
All right, thank you, Marsha, for helping us with that information, and that's on the Ukraine war. We are also now picking up on what the European Union's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, warned on the talks. She said the talks between Russian President Putin and US envoy Steve Witkoff could pressure Ukraine into making concessions. Let's listen into her comments.
All the pressure will be put on the weaker side, because that is the easier way to stop this war when Ukraine surrenders. But this is not in anybody's interest, not in the interest of Ukraine, not in the interest of European Union, also not in the interest of the global overall security.
And speaking in Brussels, Kallas emphasized that Russia doesn't want peace and that the European Union must strengthen Ukraine to stand firm. Her comments followed a proposal to limit Russia's military budget in response to a US-backed peace plan that restricts Ukraine's armed forces. This is what she further stated.
I'm afraid that all the pressure will be put on the victim, which is that Ukraine has to make concessions and obligations. Whereas, in order to have peace, we shouldn't lose focus that it's actually Russia who has started this war. and Russia that is continuing this war, and Russia that is really targeting civilian infrastructure every single day to cause as much damage as possible.
Moving on, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Grushko rejected this, saying no power could curb Russia's military budget. Kallis also mentioned a productive meeting between U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Ukrainian officials, though the results are unclear. The European Union Council is expected to discuss military aid to Ukraine in upcoming talks. Meanwhile, the Kremlin says it will not engage in what it calls a megaphone diplomacy regarding U.S. talks on Ukraine. A Kremlin spokesperson made the comment, adding that President Vladimir Putin is scheduled to meet U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff tomorrow. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says a meeting with Ukrainian officials in Florida was very productive, but cautioned that work remains to end Russia's war in Ukraine. Let's listen into what was said.
We had another very productive session building off Geneva, building off the events of this week. As I told you earlier this morning, our goal here is to end the war, but it's more than just to end the war. We don't just want to end the war, we also want to help Ukraine be safe forever, so never again will they face another invasion, and equally importantly, we want them to enter an age of true prosperity.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump says peace discussions involving the U.S., Ukraine and Russia are going along well. He said the goal is to stop the ongoing loss of life in more than 3.5-year-long war, adding that he believes a lot of souls could be saved. Let's listen into that.
Can you give us an update on what took place in South Florida today, those talks between the U.S. and the Ukrainians?
Well, they're going along, and they're going along well. We want to stop people from being killed. Doesn't have much to do with us, but I'd like to see if we can save a lot of souls. A lot of people are being killed. Last month, we had 27,000 people killed in that ridiculous war that should have never happened. It would have never happened if I were president.
Have you spoken with Rubio and Witkoff since
I
that
have,
meeting?
yeah. I've spoken to them, and they're doing well. Ukraine's got some difficult little problems. They have some difficult problems, but I think Russia would like to see it end, and I think I know Ukraine would.
And the 28-point Ukraine peace plan limits Ukraine's military, closes NATO membership and makes Western security guarantees unconditional and unclear. Territorial negotiations favor Russia, with Crimea effectively recognized as Russian, Donetsk and Luhansk under Russian control, and Odessa left as a grey zone for future discussion. Europe is largely excluded from the post-war architecture, leaving the US and Russia to shape the outcome. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has also defended the government's newly announced budget and the role of finance